Are you curious about the true story behind the Hollywood blockbuster Braveheart? The film tells the tale of William Wallace, also known as the hero of Scotland, but there is much more to his story than what the movie shows. In reality, Wallace was a significant figure in Scottish history who posed a threat to the English king, Edward I. After winning several battles against the English, Wallace was captured and brutally executed. Despite his heroism, there's much about Wallace's early life that remains a mystery. So how did Wallace become such an important figure, and what led to his tragic downfall? In this video, we'll delve deep into the life and legacy of William Wallace, uncovering the truth behind his story and the bloody execution that made him a legend. William Wallace, also known as Braveheart, is a well-known historical figure in Scotland who served as the inspiration for a successful Hollywood blockbuster. Despite being a constant source of irritation for King Edward I of England and winning a number of victories against the English army stationed in Scotland, his background is not as well known as it should be. Wallace was captured by the English, who executed him brutally because they perceived him to be a significant threat to England. Despite being considered a heroic figure and becoming a guardian of Scotland, Wallace was killed by the English. Although Wallace was born around the year 1270, very little information is known about his early life, including the identity of his parents. The death of King Alexander III precipitated a succession crisis in Scotland, and there is no obvious candidate to succeed him on the throne. Scotland has been relatively stable during King Alexander III's reign. This resulted in civil unrest, and as a result, Edward I of England was asked to step in and help. In the end, he saw Scotland not as a sovereign state with borders, but rather as a potential territory to be conquered, and declared John Balliol to be the rightful king of Scotland while treating him as a puppet ruler. Additionally, the English king demanded homage from the people of Scotland, which led to an increase in resentment towards England on the part of the Scots. Afterward, a council was established, and it formed an alliance with France. This provoked a great deal of outrage in England, given that Edward's relationship with the French had been strained for a long time. This was interpreted by Edward as a declaration of war. He led an assault on the town of Berwick-upon-Tweed, where he slaughtered the inhabitants and destroyed the town. Edward did not face any significant opposition from within Britain at the time, despite the fact that it was widely believed that he was a skilled military commander. It is believed that William Wallace, who was described as a tall man with a muscular build, was part of the Scottish army during the invasion and may have gained experience fighting the English, possibly even as an archer within Edward's army. This was supported by the fact that William Wallace was described as having a height of 6 feet and a muscular build. On the other hand, there is not a lot of information out there about this subject. The actions of the English king incited a great deal of resentment in Scotland, which ultimately resulted in a rebellion directed at Edward. After joining the rebellion in May 1297, William Wallace's first act of defiance was the murder of the English sheriff of Lanark. This took place shortly after Wallace joined the rebellion. After that, he joined forces with another Scottish commander, and the two of them carried out an attack on Scone together. While other uprisings were occurring all over Scotland at the same time, Wallace took command of a local army and began attacking English settlements along the River Tay and River Forth. Wallace and the other rebels continued their fight against the English, despite the fact that nobles eventually capitulated to the English. In order to conduct raids on English settlements, Wallace established a base of operations within Ettrick Forest. He joined forces with Andrew Murray, and on September 11, 1297, their forces confronted the English army near the Forth River, which was close to Stirling. Wallace and Murray's forces were victorious. Even though Wallace's army was outnumbered, they were able to emerge victorious thanks to Wallace's excellent command of his forces and expertise in reading the battle. John de Warenne, a Sikh viceroy of Surrey's army, which included approximately 3,000 mounted soldiers and 9,000 infantrymen, attempted to cross the river, but was prevented from doing so by an arrow bridge. The army was led by Surrey. Wallace inspired his troops to be brave and maintain their position, and they were ultimately successful in crossing the river and slaughtering the English. The dishonorable commander's reputation improved as a result, and his self-assurance increased. Following this, Wallace and Murray were given the responsibility of watching over the Kingdom of Scotland. In his raids into northern England, Wallace was successful in driving the English back, and his route took him through Northumberland. His knighthood came as a result of the Scottish monarchy's acknowledgement of his value as a military asset. On the other hand, the actions of Wallace angered the English king, who decided to launch a second invasion of Scotland the following year, in April 1298. He was responsible for the recruitment of a large number of soldiers and the payment of 25,000 of them to fight against the Scottish. Edward carried out a number of raids on Scottish settlements and recovered a number of castles that had been lost. But he was unable to find William Wallace. The Scots observed the battle from behind, while Edward's army struggled with low morale and a lack of food supplies. Upon hearing that Wallace and his Scottish army were based near Falkirk, Edward quickly headed there to defeat them. However, the Battle of Falkirk broke out on July 22, 1298, and resulted in Wallace's defeat. Edward's army utilized Welsh longbowmen, who inflicted heavy damage on the Scottish forces, while his cavalry relentlessly attacked and broke through Wallace's circular defense formation. The English continued to assault the Scottish ranks, causing them to suffer significant losses. Wallace managed to escape and resigned as Guardian of Scotland, with his reputation severely tarnished. Following the battle, it is believed that he fled to France or Rome seeking assistance, but returned to Scotland in 1304 as a wanted man. Despite pressure from Scottish nobles, Wallace refused to give in to Edward and remained in hiding until his capture on August 5, 1305. A Scottish knight loyal to the English betrayed him, and he was handed over to the sheriff of Dumbarton after being captured in his bed under the cover of darkness. After being transported to London, Wallace was paraded through the city on August 23, 1305. Amidst a rather triumphant setting, he was then taken to Westminster Hall for a routine hearing where he was accused of treason, crowned with a crown of oak symbolizing his status as a king of the outlawed Scots, and sentenced to death without any opportunity for a defense. Despite his claim that he could not be a traitor to Edward since he was never his subject, he was immediately taken to the Tower of London for execution. Stripped naked and with his heels tied to a horse, Wallace was dragged through the streets of London for 4 miles, his head smashing against the cobbled streets while Londoners hurled insults at him. Ultimately, he was taken to Smithfield. Smithfield was a notable site of execution for centuries, and during the Tudor era, it gained notoriety for burnings at the stake. However, William Wallace was sentenced to be hanged, drawn, and quartered, a brutal and sadistic punishment for treason. Upon arrival, he was unhitched from the horse and led to the scaffold in front of the London crowd. It's likely that the Londoners were aware of Wallace, the rogue Scottish giant who had caused them great suffering in the battle against the English army. The executioner placed a noose around Wallace's neck and over the gallows, suspending him above the crowd. Just before he died, he was cut down and placed on a table where he was dismembered, castrated, and had his entrails, liver, heart, and lungs removed and burned in front of him. It is possible that Wallace was still alive during this time. He was then quartered and beheaded by an axeman, and his remains were sent to Berwick, Newcastle, Perth, and Stirling to serve as a warning to others. His head was dipped in tar and displayed on a pole on London Bridge. Today, William Wallace is most famous for his portrayal in the movie Braveheart, which contains many historical inaccuracies. In reality, he was a skilled military commander who fought against King Edward I and the English army. Although he had several victories against Edward, he was ultimately betrayed and handed over to the English, resulting in his horrific execution at Smithfield. As we come to the end of this video, we hope you have learned more about the heroic figure of William Wallace and the bloody execution that marked the end of his life. Wallace's bravery, military prowess, and unyielding commitment to his country's independence have made him an enduring symbol of Scottish resistance against English oppression. His story continues to inspire people around the world, and his legacy lives on in popular culture, including the Hollywood blockbuster Braveheart. While there is much that remains unknown about Wallace's life and the circumstances surrounding his execution, his story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up for what you believe in, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. We hope that this video has given you a glimpse into the life of this remarkable hero and inspired you to learn more about the fascinating history of Scotland. If you found this video informative, please consider sharing it with others and subscribing to our channel for more thought-provoking content.